Thanks for stopping by Big Top Gaming. My name is Brian, and in this video we're going to be hitting up part 3 of the 2023 update for Cool Mini or Not. I think they're referring it to 2021 part or 0.02 or something like that, but we're just going to go with 2023 because it makes more sense and makes it feel like somebody just didn't forget to update us for 2.5 years. This is part 3. If you're coming to it for the first, if you're only focusing on the factions that are in here, there's been a couple other ones for Starks, Lannister, Neutral, then Free Folk, and Night Watch. But today we're going to be trying to do Targaryens, Baratheons, Greyjoys, and the small update for Martells. So first up for the Baratheon changes, we're going to be taking a look at Davos Seaworth, the hero of Blackwater. Now this is his commander version, and he got the universal change to Outflank. So if you haven't kept up with the other two videos before this, Outflank got changed to you may hold this unit off the table in reserve instead of deploying it. At the start of any round, if you are not the first player, you may place one unit from reserve fully within short range of a friendly or flank table edge, unactivated. So the cool thing about this is you don't have to worry about claiming the maneuver position on the tactic zone anymore. That's a done deal, or you don't have to mess with it anymore. The other cool thing about Outflank is if you have any reason to, like maybe something's collapsed or something didn't quite go right, or you need to put more pressure in certain places on your own table edge, you can now come in from the back side of your table. It used to be only that you could come in from the flank edges. So I think it's a neat change, but not like super impactful. It's just corner case if you happen to need it. The thing that I like most about Outflank changes is when we get them on commanders, because before it was just a completely worthless rule on his card. It was like, okay, Davos is always going to start on the table, and the Pathfinder was just like used for maneuvering the middle of the table. But now you can actually, if you're going into player setup terrain, which I do appreciate quite a bit in casual games, not so much in competitive ones though, but if you're using player place terrain to set up some really not fun terrain on the sides of the table, you can kind of block your opponent off from certain objectives and outflank Davos onto that side, and then your opponent's going to have a rough time trying to pivot and get over there. I really do like the outflank change, and I think Davos already is a really amazing commander for Baratheons, and I think he just gets even better with outflank. So next on the list is going to be Eldon Estermont, Lord of Greenstone. Another commander change here, but it's another universal one where they made changes to Hardened. So Hardened now states, each time an enemy is performing an attack on this unit, after rolling defense dice, this unit blocks one hit for each of its destroyed ranks. So previously you got one hit base and then plus one hit for each of your destroyed ranks, so you're always blocking hits with Hardened, and when you got down to like your last rank, it was near impossible to get you off the table with attrition factored in. And with Baratheons having such a phenomenal defensive line, Hardened on Eldon Estermont, if you stuck him in any 3+ unit, like my go-to for him was typically putting him in a unit of Warden so that I had that 3+ save, and if anybody wanted to come into him, it was going to be a long slog and you were not going to get out of combat, and he was just marking targets wherever he needed to. Not to say that Harden becomes worthless now, but it is going to be harder to get to that point where you're going to be auto-blocking hits, and you won't become an absolute nuisance to get off the table once you're on your second or first rank. So I think the change is fine, and Baratheons, as much as they really liked abusing the Hardened with their defensive stats, I don't think it's a big deal or big problem for them. I still think Eldon Estermont is a phenomenal commander with that change. The next change for attachments is both to Loras Tyrell, the Knight of Flowers, and the King's Squire. So these are his first version attachments. It's a universal change to Expert Duelist. Expert Duelist now reads, each time this unit performs a melee attack, before rolling the attack dice, you choose one. The attack either deals +1 wound, or target one infantry attachment in the defender's unit and roll a die. On a 5+, destroy that attachment. So I think I've probably mentioned this 4 times now, so I don't want to get too much on a soapbox here, but I don't know if making the big change, I guess, here, if you missed it, was that Expert Duelist, the killing the infantry attachment used to go off on a 3 or better. Now it's a 5 or better. So they've lowered the expected outcome with probability to 33% from 66%. And probability on 1d6 is like dice magic. I really don't think it exists, but practically it doesn't exist. Mathematically it does, but whatever. So I don't know if I'm super jazzed about the change because it still means that 33% of the time it's still going to kill an attachment, which I don't know if lowering its expected outcome is really enough to lower the fear of Expert Duelist. I think some people might stop taking it in their list when they were really leaning on trying to get attachments. But dealing the auto wound is really where I think Expert Duelist comes to life. Making sure you're getting those panic tests through. And then like I said, I'm not quite sure if Expert Duelist on a 5+ is really going to alter its existence, because on a 5+ it's still going to feel crappy. So I don't know if it's going to I think it might stop scaring people from taking attachments in their lists, but I don't know if it's really going to stop people from taking them in their lists either. So it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out, and I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are in the comments below on Expert Duelist. So next up for Baratheons is going to be transitioning us into the unit changes, and the first one is going to be the Champions of the Stag. Their morale worsened from 5+ to 6+, and their attack dice dropped from 7/5 to 6/4. So I think for folks who have been utilizing these quite a bit, the Champions of the Stag are just very difficult to get rid of. You have plenty of ways to get extra morale in this in Baratheons, and a 5+ morale base is really good. So I think when you have amazing defensive stats like this unit previously had 2+, 5+, going down to 2+, 6+ is still pretty good, but at least it's a little mitigatable, because to be honest, that 5+ morale previously was typically swinging around a 4. So I don't think that this really completely hurts them. It just makes them a little bit more manageable, and the output of their melee attack means that they really get to do what I think Cool Mini or Not wanted this unit to do. They wanted them to be in combat and kind of grind a little bit. You get to get your critical blow all the time now, so that's still really good. And then enemies that you charge become weakened, so the grind just kind of starts happening. You vulnerable a unit if you're stuck in combat. I think the Champions of the Stag were really meant to be a cavalry unit that could get up into the engagement quickly, in quotes, at speed 4, but they weren't meant to just kind of be indestructible and wipe everything they touch with that 7/5 attack stat. Now I think they actually really fit into the role of staying in for the long haul, and I think they'll still be utilized, but you might start to see a small decrease in their survivability and efficacy in combat, which I think is fine. Like I said, I think this unit had a little bit too much going for it, and I have seen many players tilt to the maximum because of this unit, so I think it's a change for the better for the game overall. The next change we get here is going to be to the R'hllor Queensmen. They changed the order Queensblade, so Queensblade now states when a friendly R'hllor unit in short range is attacked, before rolling attack dice, you search your tactics deck or discard pile for one Baratheon Justice card and add it to your hand. Then you shuffle your tactics deck. So the big change here is that you used to be able to go get Baratheon Conviction or Baratheon Justice, and for those who haven't engaged with Baratheons often, Baratheon Conviction was a card that stated it still is, but when a friendly unit passes a morale test, the unit restores 2 wounds, and then if you control the crown, everything they're engaged with takes a panic test, and if you control the missive, each enemy they're engaged with gets 1 condition token. So just being able to, the Queen's Men have a 3+, 5+ stat for defense. So they're very difficult to get rid of, and then whenever you attacked them, they count as a R'hllor unit in short range, so they could just go ahead and fish out Baratheon Conviction from the deck or fish it from the discard pile and just keep recycling it, because they were very unlikely to fail their morale test at a 5+. So they'd restore the 2 wounds, which probably is the amount of damage that you got to do to them, and they would cause an enemy to get panicked or put out a condition token. With them having 2 the last, they were also, with Baratheon Conviction on top of that, they're extremely difficult to get rid of. You could never really cut through these units, plus having the ability to fish 4 cards out of your deck after being attacked, Baratheon Justice and Conviction, and still having access to those as long as you're being attacked, it made it so that the Baratheon deck got a lot more predictable, because you could just cycle out these cards and then have quicker access to your Ours is the Fury, and if you happen to have like Kingsmen in there too, if you were doubling up on those, which I don't think many people were, that's another thing you filter out. I think improving the quality of the deck for the Baratheons was maybe like a side problem, but the real problem here was making sure that this unit never went anywhere, or the unit that you happen to be attacking. So I think the change to the Queensmen is perfectly acceptable. Baratheon Justice is still a really amazing card. It's basically, if you get attacked, you get to like old Warcry them, where you can panicked and vulnerable them, and then if you have either that crown or missive, you would get to weaken them as well. So you just get to put everything on them, and that still leaves the Queensmen in a really aggressive spot. So I don't think this is going to pull them out of lists, but you might stop seeing like double Queensmen that are just trying to recycle Baratheon convictions. So now we get to round the corner going to the Targaryens, and they got a pretty decent amount of changes, but a lot of them are universal. Starting off with Barristan Selmy the Bold, which is his commander attachment version. They'd made changes to Knightly Vow. If you've missed the previous videos, Knightly Vow now states, after deployment, target one enemy unit. When charging that enemy, this unit may reroll any charge distance dice. While you control the swords, this unit's melee attacks gain +1 to hit. So previously, Knightly Vow was kind of only good until the unit you were going at was dead, and I do feel like re-rolling charge distance, you're only going to really utilize that once unless you're being tricky or your opponent's being tricky, and then the +1 to hit only mattered when that unit was, when you were engaged with that unit, right? So a lot of times your opponent could dodge you and make your Knightly Vow not very worthwhile. I did like to use Knightly Vow as a way to control where my opponent positions a unit. Like if I don't want something in the middle, typically Knightly Vow could scare them away if you had Knightly Vow in a really hard-hitting unit. With the new changes, the charge distance dice is still always on, but again, I feel like that's got diminishing returns. Well, clearly it's got diminishing returns, but you know what I mean? It only seems to matter in certain situations, that first charge or slippery units. The +1 to hit is the problem that I have with this one. I like that if you control the swords, you get +1 to hit no matter what you're fighting into. But what I don't like is that you need the swords to get the +1 to hit against your Vow target. I really think a better change would have been to give +1 to hit against the Knightly Vow target, and then always have the +1 to hit if you have the swords against any other unit. I feel like Knightly Vow is just really, really close to being perfect, and right now I feel like it's just a little short for me. But overall, I think the change is a positive one because it makes it so that Knightly Vow just doesn't seem like it's wasted after the unit's wiped. The next change coming up here is another universal one to Belwaz the Strong, his commander version. They made the change to Harden, so he has everything that I talked about Eldon, and kind of for the same reasons. Like, I think a lot of times you'd see Belwas in Unsullied, and them having just an automatic block one, and if they were pikemen with shield wall, like, you just really weren't moving this unit at all. And not that Belwas is like the most amazing commander in the universe, but you know, it's hardened is just really one of those things where it was so difficult to get anything dislodged, and when you have a weaker armor save like you see in some of the Targaryens, it was a little bit over the top. I think it was one of the things that put Belwaz into the competitive discussion of being a commander, outside of some of his commander cards being decent. But you know, right now I don't think that it gets him off the table at all. It just kind of changes the priority of getting him into your pairing. Our next attachment change comes to another commander, and that's going to be to Daenerys Targaryen, the Mother of Dragons. They removed Heir of the House Targaryen ability. So Heir of the House Targaryen was her, if she dies, she gives your opponent 2 victory points. And so we saw that leave Joffrey. We saw it get put on Mance Rayder. But now we have it coming off of Daenerys, and I'm not 100% sure if it makes, like, you know, if it makes, like, fluffy sense, because she is, like, the whole reason why most of the things that are in the Targaryens are together, so she's pretty pivotal to keeping that stuff together, and I'm pretty sure the dragons wouldn't be happy if she was dead also. But, I'm happy that she's not forfeiting victory points, because if you do play her in a dragon-based list, you're kind of limited on your options as far as what kind of units you can put her in based on points. So getting rid of that and making it so that your opponent only is going to prioritize her to get rid of her Mother of Dragons ability before it goes off feels a lot better than your opponent just laser focusing on her, because with you bringing multiple small-based units, like the small solo-based units for the dragons, it was really easy to maneuver around the table and get in between those to get to Daenerys's unit. So I'm happy with the change. As being a person who really likes putting her on the table a lot, I'm thinking that it's going to make the games a lot less narrow when we get towards the end if Daenerys goes down. So the next change is to Khal Drogo, the Great Khal, another commander change and another universal one. With Khal Drogo being the best expert duelist in the game, being that he's on a horse, so he can't be expert duelist back. I think he was really great. I am perfectly fine with him having the 5+ thing now with him specifically, because like Iron Resolve is a good ability, and whenever he goes on a unit, getting to that morale test is really important to try and force some extra damage. So I'm perfectly fine with him being on a 5+, because I really wasn't utilizing it a whole lot anyways. He was typically going for units that he could clip out of really quick and then get into the next one through overrun, so I won't be missing the 3+ on Khal Drogo. The next attachment changes to the Unsullied Officer, and this is another like universal-ish, well no, it's universal change. Anyone who has Relentless saw changes to it. Now Relentless states, after this unit is attacked, this unit may perform 1 melee attack action. They also dropped the Unsullied Officer from 3 to 2 points. And I think with the Unsullied Officer, this is probably the one where this is the most problematic, or will probably become the most problematic in the future. For 2 points now, which if you're playing Unsullied, you're paying a lot of points anyways, so getting that extra point means that you can get more attachments somewhere or get a better NCU than just, whatever kind of thing you can afford at 4 points. But the reason why I think the Unsullied Officer is so bonkers with this is that Unsullied in general stick around for a really long time, and they're super effective until the very last drop. And the Unsullied Officer brings along go down fighting with him. So each time you're attacked, if you lose a rank, you're going to do a wound to the enemy and then you're going to attack them back. I think that this could be compounded over time to be a really ridiculously effective way to clip through units. It's going to make your opponent want to only tie up the Unsullied and not actually try to fight them. But I'm interested to see how this one turns out, because at 3 points, or at 2 points from 3, I could probably get 2 of these in my list on Unsullied Swordmasters, and that would be really difficult to try and get around. I've played double Unsullied many a time, and they're already difficult to get rid of. So now having Relentless like this means that your opponent might not want to take the swords on round 1, or might just take it to try and stop you from doing anything with it. And the other cool thing about this that I don't know if it's super apparent is that if your opponent tries to shoot this unit while they're engaged with something, that will trigger Relentless and you will fight the thing you're engaged with. So there's really no way to get around this unless you're shooting them while they're not engaged. It's kind of bonkers. So I feel like this one's going to turn out to be kind of the more troublesome of the attachments that have Relentless, but we'll see how it all shakes out. Now we get to transition into the unit changes, and the first one up is going to be the Dothraki Hrakkars, and they got that universal change to outflank that we talked about with Davos. And I think that with these guys, it's interesting because they're on that cavalry like war base or war machine base, and for those who aren't savvy to the like little nuances of trickery, if you deploy these guys like parallel, like they look like they're long ways up against your deployment edge, when you end up activating them for their cavalry move, they get to pivot and essentially kind of get an extra 2-ish inches more than what they would have if they would have just started at their own backline with the short edge on your deployment edge. So I don't know if outflank really does much for them, because they are a fairly maneuverable unit, but not having to take the maneuver position in order to get these in, and them having that cavalry move, or the Hrakkar and Tamers move, if you want to call it that, I think they're going to be a lot more prevalent in lists, and I wouldn't be shocked if there were some changes to these units, because I think they're strong. They were strong before, and they're going to be strong even stronger with outflank being really effective. So the next unit change we come across is going to be to Drogo's Blood Riders. They got the Warcry change, and for those who are just watching this video only, Warcry now states, start of a friendly turn, this unit performs one morale test. On a success, target one enemy unit in long range, and it becomes panicked or vulnerable. So the previous wording on this was that you got panicked and vulnerable, and Warcry was really like, I think it's meta-defining, like almost game-defining, really. And having to pick between the two does lower its efficacy, but I don't think it lowers its value. With the Blood Riders, they don't have a lot of panic shenanigans, so panic was more like, if you get it, cool, but really you're punching for that vulnerable most of the time, and you can pick and choose if you think the panic's going to be really valuable to you, but I think this change is fine for them. It's not a big deal to me. The other thing that happened with the Blood Riders is they added the Blood Rider ability to the unit, so I thought it was funny that as soon as you had these Blood Riders broken up into unit attachments, that's when they became real Blood Riders, and the unit that they were in couldn't be weakened. But as soon as they went into Drogo's Blood Rider conglomerate, then they could be weakened again. It's almost like Drogo was the reason why they were sucking at fighting for a little bit. But now they've got that Blood Rider ability back, so it makes sense, and I'm happy with that change because I think it gives the Blood Riders a little bit more like sis boom pop as a unit, because before they were just like dudes who had a 3+ defense save and Warcry. So now at least we've got a little bit more going on with them, and I'm really happy with the change. As a person who plays Drogo often, this is going to be, it's not going to change whether it's in my list or not. Like, if you're taking Drogo, you're usually taking this unit. I'm not finding many reasons to not take them, so it just means they're going to be in my list more frequently anyways. The final change is going to be to all three of the dragons. We got Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion. They all dropped from 8 to 7 points. So a recent update to the Targaryens found that Daenerys was maybe just a little too strong when she was able to reduce the points of all of her dragons, and that was only in her Mother of Dragons mode. I think maybe her NCU could drop them in points, but I can't remember right off the top of my head. It's been a while since I've taken that package before, but at any rate, all three dragons drop down a point, so now you're gonna with that change, I think it means you might be starting to see the 3 dragon list coming back again. Previously, previous to the update, when it was 24 points to get all of them, you didn't really have a whole lot of wiggle room. You got like a unit and maybe 2 NCUs or a NCU, and Daenerys was either in a good strong unit or a really crappy one. So now with the 3-point reduction, she's kind of backish to where she was. I don't think the dragons, like, they've gotten changes to kind of lower their efficacy through combat, so I'm interested to see how this one shakes out, because as I said earlier, I play Mother of Dragons a lot, and the dragons are still pretty fine when you're only taking 2 of them. But now that I can take all 3 again and not feel so taxed for doing so, I'm very interested to see how things shake out. I think the next event that I go to is probably going to resurrect the 3 dragon list that I've been playing in the past. So super excited for this as a Targaryen player. I'm over the moon with pretty much every change that's happened to the units in this faction. So now we'll round the corner to the tactics card changes for House Targaryen, and the first one is not an unexpected change. It's going to be to field control. This triggers when an NCU claims the maneuver position. If the NCU was friendly, you may replace that zone's effect with one friendly combat unit performs one maneuver or retreat action with +1 speed. Any enemy it disengages from becomes weakened. If the NCU was an enemy, after resolving that zone's effect, one friendly combat unit performs a 3-inch shift. So previously, the thing that changed on here was that second half. Previously, field control just stated you replace the zone's effect completely with your opponent shifting 3 inches, and they became weakened at the end of that 3-inch shift. So they got rid of the weakened business here, and now it's just that your unit gets to make a 3-inch shift after they've maneuvered. So I think that's an interesting change, especially given the reasons why field control was so powerful. There are still many NCUs that exchange the effective zones. So if you were to exchange the effective zone based on the way the timing works out in the book, the active player has to resolve their thing first, and then you as the field control player would be able to say, oh, you exchanged that ability. Now I'm going to go ahead and say you can't do this, especially for those people who had like once per game things. It was really harsh for them. But now they've kind of eliminated the negative play experience of field control and just made it so that once your enemy moves around a little bit or does whatever kind of fancy thing they want to do with the tactics board, you get to shift a unit 3 inches up. I like this because it's an interesting reaction to being able to say, oh, my opponent extended their threat because they think they can, get forward a little bit and stay out of my threat, but now I can perform this 3-inch shift and I can get closer to them. So now that the advantage they thought they were taking on the table, they don't have anymore. And that makes me feel like field control is more like, relatable fluff wise, or what it's meant to do on the table in the suspended mind space, right? So the thing that, I think field control also was one of the reasons why people never played with outflank, because they're like, well, why would I do this against a Targaryen player? Because they'll always just shut off my outflank when they get field control. Field control was one of those cards where you always just had to assume it was in your opponent's hand, because if you assumed it wasn't and then it was really not good with whatever you wanted to do. But a lot of the things in the game, like outflank and endless horde, that replaced the effect of the maneuver zone don't do that anymore. So I don't know if field control 100% needed to change, but I think getting rid of the ability to if your opponent took that maneuver position and used an exchange ability, then I can see where it was a problem. But I feel like that's a little bit more niche, and I just don't know if this needed to change that way anymore. But I'll be interested to see what plays out. I think the change is good for what the card is getting at doing, so I'm indifferent to the change in general. The final tactics card change we come across with Targaryens is going to be to Marcellin, the Mother's Men commander, and that's to Warcry. So he got all the changes that normal Warcry got. It's just now panicked or vulnerable. And my last soapbox moment for Warcry right now is going to be on commander cards. I hate it when I see a commander card that has a unit's ability on it. It just doesn't feel impactful to me. And with Warcry, you have so many things. It's like a big opportunity cost to use Warcry on a tactics card. First of all, it takes a spot in your tactics deck, so you're staying away from some of your more important cards. And you have to use it. You have to use a trigger for it. So if you have multiple things that trigger when a friendly combat unit activates, that's another opportunity cost for Warcry. The next thing is you're playing a commander card and performing a morale test. So you don't even know if this is actually going to do anything, because you could easily fail your morale test. And now you've got to pick between panicked or vulnerable. I think that Warcry as a commander card really should have changed to become a new card and just say the unit doesn't have to perform a morale test, and it's just when at the start of a friendly turn you get to panic and vulnerable something. I don't appreciate what happened to Warcry when it comes to commander cards. When it's a unit, sure, super cool. You can do that every turn and that's fine. But when you just have this one opportunity and it takes a moment or takes a spot in your tactics deck and you have to pass that morale test, I really don't like what they did with this one now. So I would like to see this changed in the future, but I don't know if it's really going to happen. So now we can move over to House Greyjoy, and they got a fair few number of changes here. The first one starts with Asha Greyjoy, Captain of the Black Wind, which is her attachment version, and she just got the changes to Warcry that we've talked about before. I think for Greyjoys this actually hurts a bit more because they are extremely tempo based, and in order to keep that tempo rolling, you wanted to make sure you were punching through the armor as best as you could and getting as much damage through in panic that you could. So now having to pick between the two means that you're upsetting that tempo a bit. So I'm not saying that Warcry needed to remain the same on Asha Greyjoy's attachment version, because again, it's still an extremely powerful thing and it let the Greyjoys do what they wanted to. It still doesn't mean that I'm not going to put her in pretty much every Greyjoy list that I play, because Inspiring Presence is still really good, and being able to just on tap at any point when I want to get a panicked or vulnerable token out is still extremely valuable. So she doesn't become, like I said, she's not less valuable in a Greyjoy list. It's just that her, of all the factions outside of maybe Lannister, I think that Asha Greyjoy's Warcry change probably hits the hardest. Now, Asha Greyjoy's commander version, the Kraken's daughter, also got a change, very much the similar change that Mance had gotten, where they removed Rally Point and put on Boisterous Charisma for her. So Boisterous Charisma states, this unit may never be targeted by enemy orders, tactics cards, or be influenced by NCUs. She's still kept her Inspiring Presence and Stubborn Tenacity, so none of that changed, but she no longer has that bubble of the 5+ morale that she ends up putting out, and I think given that I don't really appreciate a lot of Asha Greyjoy's commander cards, and I still value her more as an attachment than a commander, I don't think this really puts her in any better of a spot, because I think the Rally Point was one of the real big reasons why you wanted to take her, and Boisterous Charisma just doesn't seem like it's really that great on her unit, because, like, I don't know. It's cool that you can't be targeted by enemy orders, tactics cards, or be influenced by enemy NCUs, but you might want to, like, that might make your opponent's choice easier for which unit they want to screw with, and with you kind of crashing through them like this big wave, I don't know if you want to just shut off a complete access to a unit to make those choices for your opponent more easy. So I don't know. I've never been a fan of Asha Greyjoy as a commander, and I'm still not, and I don't think this change really puts her in any better of a spot. I do feel like she kind of needs like a general redesign for me to be more interested in her, but again, I'm interested to listen to people's comments on this video to maybe not correct me, but make me see things differently, because right now she's probably like one of my bottom of the barrel Greyjoy commanders, and I don't think the change helps her at all. I think it's almost like she's paying for Mance Rayder's sins. Baelor Blacktide is the next one on our list. This is his commander version, Lord of the Blacktide. He got that universal change to Hardened, which I think, again, perfectly fine. For Greyjoys, it'll hurt a little bit too, because they don't typically have the greatest defense saves in the universe. Probably more so than what... it hurts a little bit more than what it did on Belwaz. Now, I don't know how many people were really throwing Baelor Blacktide on the table. I've played him a couple times and have been generally, like, kind of middling on him, not overly impressed, not overly disappointed, but to the last, plus Harden meant that his unit typically was just not going anywhere. So I still think Harden's going to keep his unit around a lot, and he still gets to be very tanky and attrition based. So I don't think it's a huge problem for him, but I think he does feel it. Again, just like Asha, he feels it a lot more than other factions do for the change. Next up, we have a change to Newt the Barber. He got another universal change to the Vassal rule. So now for Victarion's Vassal, it states, this model counts as Victarion Greyjoy for all abilities and effects. So previously, this was just for tactics cards. And again, I've said it 2 times before now, and I'll say it again. I do not have enough of a photographic reference to the game's rules and all of the different cards in the game to be able to tell you what being triggered off of abilities and effects really means outside of a tactics card, because I don't know many abilities off the top of my head that are not tied to tactics cards that ask for the commander. So I'm interested to see where this goes, if there's some implications in the future that maybe I don't know yet, or if there's something in the game that I'm just not really bouncing off of me. Again, leave a comment on the video to let me know if there's something I'm missing here, because I'm really interested to figure it out without having to thumb through War Council endlessly. The next change we've got is to the Reaver Captain, and this was another universal change of Outflank that just, I'm not going to read it again. We've read it like 2 or 3 times now, but the change to the Reaver Captain, I think, is interesting. Remember that you can take only 2 of these in your army, and they do go beyond the normal attachment limits. Now, I think if you want to make Asha Greyjoy, the Kraken's daughter, a really interesting commander, they could have given her a rule that says she can include 2 Reaver Captains in her unit without having to pay the points for them, and then I think Asha Greyjoy becomes a really interesting commander, because now she's not just tactics cards, the abilities. But I think that Reaver Captains, I don't know how much more you would see them in a list. I think that the Reaver Captain change for Outflank makes them actually takeable, as before they were really a dead choice. But I think that Greyjoys can get a lot of value out of ambushing. People were sticking Reaver Captains on like Ironborn Bowmen, and that was when you were able to still kind of just outflank them like you had to do it the old-fashioned way. But with this new change, I think it actually means that the Ironborn bowmen, like ambushing in, or maybe your trappers or something, it really kind of confounds your opponent and can let you control that table a little bit more, which the Greyjoys really like, kind of manipulating the table or manipulating the pace of the game through their own actions. And I think the Reaver Captain becomes an actual interesting choice for the army again. The next change we've got comes to Carl Asha's Champion and Carl the Maid. These were just the changes to Expert Duelist that we've already touched on twice. I don't think there's anything extra to add here for Greyjoys, just that it is a change, and, I'm still indifferent towards the efficacy of what the change to Expert Duelist is going to do, but I'm really playing it for the +1 wound more than anything right now. The next attachment change we have up here is going to be to Victarion Greyjoy, Master of the Iron Victory. They just made the change to Relentless. It's the same change that the Unsullied Swordmaster, or the Unsullied Captain has. I think it's the Unsullied Captain. But the thing about this is that they didn't drop Victarion's points at all. So Victarion, for whatever reason in the universe, costs 3 points. He has Furious Charge, which is just vulnerable when he charges something. And Relentless is just, you're not going to stack Furious Charge and Relentless, so every time his unit gets attacked, they get to fling an attack back. I don't know if they decided to keep him at 3 points because they didn't really like the Makoro garbage that was going on of resurrecting Victarion a million times, so maybe this is just like a weird taste in their mouth of like, yeah, now you won't be able to do anything with him at all. But like, Victarion Greyjoy really needed more of a different change here than like just staying 3 points and getting Relentless. I think they could have done a little bit more of a finessey change with him and dropped his points a little bit, but right now, I think if you see Victarion Greyjoy in a Greyjoy list, it's going to be as a commander only. I really don't think you're going to see him as an attachment like you did before. I think Victarion Greyjoy was really strong when he could do Relentless as performing a maneuver or an action or an attack action. But now for 3 points to just fling attacks back at your opponent, I really don't think he has a whole lot of value or place in Greyjoy lists anymore. Maybe someone can not correct me, but they can offer their opinion if it differs from mine, but I don't really think I would be spending 3 points for what he's bringing to the table anymore. Now we can transition into some unit changes where I think there's actually quality of life improvements for Greyjoys as opposed to just, happenstance changes. So the first one's going to be the Black Tide Chosen. They removed Divide the Spoils and added Embolden. So Embolden states friendly units in short range gain +1 to morale test rolls. So I think that this change here is fantastic. The Divide the Spoils was the same thing the Bowmen had, where like Black Tide Chosen don't have a pillage ability, but they were able to hand out pillage tokens from things that they were fighting. And that's cool and everything. It wasn't something that I got to utilize a whole bunch. Typically, I was taking them for their really decent stats of the 4+ defense and the 6+ morale. But now with Embolden and the change to Asha where she doesn't have her bubble of 5+ morale anymore, I think this makes them a really strong take. I liked them before this change as just a unit that could fight and exist in the middle with martial training and make sure that your opponent would really like have to struggle on these guys. But now with Embolden, they offer a really great support role in the army, and I think it's extremely welcomed. So I think people are going to start looking at Black Tide Chosen a lot more. This is a really great change for them. So I think I'm only halfway through painting the first unit that I've got, so I probably should get around to finishing that so I can start getting these guys on the table more. The next unit change for House Greyjoy gets filed in my what the heck were you thinking category, and this is going to be to the House Harlaw Reapers. The attack dice increase from second rank, or at the second rank, from 5 to 6, and they also had some changes to their pillage ability, Fervor's, or the Reaper's Fervor. Or their attack ability, I guess, but it's tied to pillage. So the Reaper's Fervor attack stat is now 764, which is extremely phenomenal for this unit because they have that 5+ defense save. So it means that on their first and second rank, or having 2 and 3 ranks, they're still really effective. So they're likely to lose that first rank, but still be really strong at 6 attack dice. And remember that in this faction, you have access to both Jaqen H'ghar and Baron Blacktide, Baron Blacktide, and they'll keep them hanging around quite a bit longer too. But the big crazy change that kind of compounds with this increased sustain in combat is to Reaper's Fervor. It's still vicious, but now the pillage kicker states, when an enemy fails a panic test from this attack, you choose one. For each pillage token on this unit, you choose an additional one. The same effect may be chosen multiple times. That enemy suffers +1 wound, or your unit restores 1 wound. This is bonkers. I've been playing House Harlaw Reapers in a Roose Bolton-led list for a long time now, and being able to swing like a -7 panic test, and then having on top of that an additional like 2 to 3 wounds. Now with the Reaper's Fervor, I'm going to be able to get like, you're going to lose a rank just straight up from failing panic on this unit, because I'm going to automatically, I should slow down. I'm really excited about this change because I think it's just ridiculous. But now when they fail that panic test, you don't have to worry about having a pillage token on you in order to get this ability to go off. It will just happen that the enemy suffers an additional wound for failing panic, or your unit can restore 1 wound, and then if you happen to have pillage tokens on you, you'll get an additional mode of that for each pillage you have on you. I don't know if, like, by and large, someone out there was saying House Harlaw Reapers somehow are just not great. And maybe it's because I'm really tilting them to the max with a lot of other elements in my list that's making me feel like they're extremely strong. But I think these guys are going to be the bane of everyone's existence when they play against Greyjoy players now, and I would not be surprised if there were some changes coming in the future that tried to pull this back a little bit, but I do think this change is going to become a little bit problematic and make the House Harlaw Reapers a real danger on the table. I'm interested to see what other people think about this one, because I'm just like, I'm over the top with how this changes. Like, I'm now seriously looking at putting 2 of these units in my list, along running around with Silenced Men. They're just going to be an unstoppable force. So our next change comes to the sole NCU that got updated here for Greyjoys, and that's going to be to Eric Ironmaker the Just. They made changes to Gifts of Iron, Gold, and Steel. That ability now states, at the start of the game, place 1 pillage token on Eric. When Eric or an enemy NCU claims the coin position, you may place 1 pillage token on Eric. When Eric claims a zone other than the coin, you may remove 1 pillage token from him and place it on 1 friendly unit with pillage. So I know that might be like a confusing-ish change if you don't really play Eric the Ironmaker much, but the change really is that, Eric started with 2 pillage tokens previously. Now he only starts 1, but his pillage tokens are a little bit easier to get because previously only an enemy NCU could claim the coin position to put a pillage token on Eric, which kind of worked out because it stopped your opponent from wanting to take that zone, and you don't want your opponent's models healing as a Greyjoy player because you want to keep that momentum in the game. But also you did have cards that trigger off of your opponent owning that zone, so it was a little rough, but now Eric can take that zone and get his own pillage tokens back, so it's kind of nice to be able to get that refueled a little bit easier. Your opponent had a lot of say whether you could do that or not. Eric's, the bottom half of his card didn't change. I guess, no, it did change a bit, Brian. Don't be a dum-dum. So before, Eric could remove a pillage token and put it on a friendly unit whenever he claimed any zone. But now he can't do that if he claims the coin. So he can only he can only gain pillage tokens by claiming the coin zone, but he can't apply pillage tokens when he claims that coin. So you kind of can't double dip on him a bunch where you're like, okay, I put him on the coin zone and I'm going to gain a pillage token and heal a unit and remove a condition and I'm going to get a pillage token on somebody. So it kind of balances him out a little bit. I don't know how much better or worse he is here, because I think a lot of people, when they started out, they really wanted Eric Ironmaker as their NCU, but it's actually quite easy to get pillage tokens, in my opinion, if you're playing the list right. So I don't think he's the mandatory thing people were thinking he was going to be, but still I think he's definitely in an interesting place now with these changes. He has a little bit more agency in what he does, and I like that about him. Now, moving on to more subtle changes, this is going to be to the tactics cards for House Greyjoy, and Asha Greyjoy, the Kraken's daughter, gets to rear her ugly head again because she gets caught by the Warcry change as well, and I still have the same feelings that I do with this as I did with Marcelin. It's just really rough that this takes up a tactics slot, so, take what you will from that. I don't like that this is the way it is, but I've already, like I said, I've stood on this soapbox long enough to where I think it's probably crumbled beneath me. But that's the Warcry change to Asha Greyjoy's card. Next up, House Greyjoy once again gets to get caught in the crosshairs of free folk, and Dagmar Cleftjaw, Master at Arms, got a change to his tactics card, Coordination Tactics. Simply, if you didn't pay attention to the free folk video, you now trigger at the start of any turn. Target 2 friendly infantry units within short range of each other. Until the end of the turn, both units gain any non-innate abilities on the other unit, and you may trigger immediately any one unused start of the turn order on either of those units. Now, I can't remember off the top of my head if there are any innate abilities in the Greyjoy faction at all, but essentially the only change here is that you used to be able to copy over innate abilities, and then you got into this really interesting discussion of, even though Coordination Tactics says that only lasts until the end of the turn, innate abilities on their own say you cannot lose this ability for any reason. So that was where kind of the issue came. It was like you were giving like Cave Dweller Savages or Thens or Bear Riders the giant ability and never losing it. So rules is written, that's kind of how that would work. But now they've kind of, eliminated that possibility of that ever happening by just saying non-innate abilities. So this isn't like a dangerous change for Greyjoys or like, oh, curse you free folk for messing with my cards. But, it's just a thing is all. It's not a big change at all. So the final changes that come to a faction in this update are going to be the Martells, and I feel like the Martells are too new to be making any big sweeping changes right now because they just haven't existed in the game space for that long to see the patterns and trends of things that people are taking advantage of. But the only change is that Oberyn Martell, the Red Viper, got the changes to Expert Duelist that everyone else did. Again, not really a big impact here. I think that he's still going to be a very competitive pick, even though, I'll just say I've talked about Expert Duelist enough, but I don't think we'll see any changes to the Martells for a while. Hopefully it's sooner than 2 years from their release, but overall it is what it is here. I'm glad that they didn't really tinker with them a bunch at knee-jerk reactions. So if you've watched all 3 of these videos, thanks a bunch for sticking around for them. Even if you've only watched till the end of this one or the end of a couple other ones, I'm still appreciative of all the support that the community gives me. I know I'm kind of behind on trying to get Ice and Fire videos made, but I'm just having a lot of difficulty balancing things right now in my own life. But I really wanted to make sure that these updates got out because they can be really difficult to digest if you're not a player of these factions or you don't see them on the table very often across from you. It gives people a better idea of what to expect if they've listened to some of my previous videos where those changes are going to be a little bit they're going to be behind now, right? So I'm hopeful that there's really no other changes to the main rules because I only really have the changes to the cards in the game right now. But overall, I think that this update cycle was good for the game. It really punched down some things that were being kind of broken to the max or taking advantage of quite a bit between Night's Watch and Free Folk. I'm really happy that a lot of the Targaryen changes were glow-ups and not so much big punches. The Warcry change on tactics cards, I'm not going to drone on with that, but that's probably the thing that I'm most disappointed in with the changes. I also feel like the Stark's Hero Box 3 must be new enough for Cool Mini or Not to miss the changes because I feel like Robb Stark, the Young King or King in the North or whatever his version is called, his 6-point attachment, feels like he has old outflank taken into account with the way his card works, and I really wish they would have taken a moment to just kind of adjust that because at 6 points I really don't feel like even new outflank would really do much for him. I also think it's criminal that he's not a commander, but this is not a Stark complaining video. I just would have liked to have seen that change happen because now he's just going to sit on people's shelves for another year or so. But at any rate, a massive thank you to Coolman You're Not for helping me out getting the information that I need to make these videos so that when their release happens, I can go live with this and present it to you. I'm really, even though I complain about some of the things they do, it's not because I'm targeting Coolman You're Not or the designers or developers and saying, you guys are being dumb. It's more like that's just my opinion, and I want to be truthful and forward-facing and real with people. And if it were me just saying this is all sunshine and rainbows and I wasn't constantly complaining about Warcry as a tactics card, then I don't feel like I would be my authentic self to everyone out there. So I hope that you get a good dose of like positivity but realism from me as well through these. So thanks again for sticking around, and I'm really looking forward to getting more of these made in the near future. I just really got to find a good balance with life and work and everything else going on right now. So thanks for bearing with me through these and making Big Top Gaming the fun place that it is for A Song of Ice and Fire content.